This is the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, presented by thehoosier.com. Hey, before we jump into this episode of the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, make sure you are subscribed to the Hoosier on 3 on YouTube for all the IU content you could need, including press conferences, highlights, recruiting updates, the Hoosier tailgate, and of course, the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast. Also, go follow Talkin Bout The Hoosiers on Spotify. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy this episode of the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast.
Hey, what's going on, Hoosier Nation? Hey, real quickly before we get started here with this video, make sure you go over to thehoosier.com and join for just $1 in your first week. With that, you get a free year subscription to theathletic.com, where you can also check out all of their content as well. Come over to thehoosier.com, join the best IU community there is out there. We'd love to have you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. I'm joined by Zach Browning. I'm Drew Rosenberg. Big show today. Hoosiers are 4-0. Zach, we talked a lot about this Illinois game last week. You and I both thought the Hoosiers would win, but I don't know about you. I didn't see 63-10 is even possible going into that game.
I'm not sure anybody did. I mean, that was about as dominant of a performance as we've seen so far this season in the entirety of college football. Indiana, one defensive breakdown that led to that long touchdown pass for Illinois, but outside of that, it was dominance in all three phases of the game for all 60 minutes of that contest. And it really was a statement to the college football world, whether Crucinelli wants to say it was a statement or not. It really was. It put the college football world on notice that, you know, Indiana isn't going anywhere. Last year, 2024, wasn't a one-hit wonder. It wasn't a flash in the pan. This team under Crucinelli is here to stay. And that's what they showed, going and beating a top 10 team in the country by 7 scores, Drew. 7 scores. It still doesn't really compute in your head, just the amount of domination that Indiana showed.
Yeah, there was, like you mentioned, it's one play. Outside of one play, Illinois had nothing offensively, and this was Luke Altmaier. You and I both, we talked a lot about him. He had a tough night, and I don't think it really was entirely his fault. You watched the game, and Illinois' offensive line had no chance against the Indiana defensive line. I think when we talk about the defensive line, we talk about Mikhail Kamara, and deservedly so, and teams are forced to double team him because of how dominant he is. But then you get these one-on-one matchups, and you get guys like Mario Landino, Kellen Wyatt, Tyreek Tucker, all making a huge impact into this game and showing, maybe you really can't double team Mikhail Kamara and leave those guys one-on-one in the interior.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most underrated part and the unheralded part of the Indiana defense so far this season is that Mikhail Kamara, he did not show up in the box score, in like the regular ESPN box score on Saturday night against Illinois. He didn't have a tackle. Didn't share a tackle, didn't split anything, nothing like that. For all intents and purposes, he was just out there, but it's not that. It's not just he's out there taking up space because he means so much to this defense and to Indiana as a whole, whether or not he's having 3 sacks in the game or no sacks in the game, because he draws those double teams. Yeah. He draws the attention of Altmaier. He draws the attention of the running back who might be chipping and looking for somebody to block. All eyes from an offensive line standpoint and from a quarterback standpoint and just a game plan standpoint for an opposition team against Indiana's defensive front. You look at Mikhail Kamara first, you circle him, and you have to put so much attention towards shutting him down that these Indiana players who came into the season, we weren't quite sure if they were going to be able to live up to the hype and live up to the expectations. I mean, CJ West, James Carpenter, they were so fantastic last season. We didn't quite know if Mario Landino and Tyreek Tucker were going to be able to live up to what those two set a year ago. But you've got guys like Kellen Wyatt. You've got Hosea Wheeler, Dominique Ratcliffe, Kellen Wyatt, the two guys already mentioned on the interior as well. It opens up so many opportunities for those guys, and not to mention the exotic blitzes that Brian Haynes likes to bring sometimes with a guy like Isaiah Jones coming out of blitz. Aiden Fisher's blitzed a lot this year. If it's like a rover-type guy like a Devon Boykin off the edge and a corner blitz type of thing, there's just so much attention focused on Mikhail Kamara that it opens up so many other options. And it will flip back and revert back at some point this season, Drew. Eventually, teams will start to focus less on Kamara and more on the fact that the other guys are killing them. And then that opens up the opportunity for Kamara to be the All-American that everybody around Indiana knows that he is and is capable of being.
Yeah, you mentioned Aiden Fisher and Isaiah Jones. I'm going to throw Elijah Hardy in that group too. How about the linebackers? All offseason, even after the Old Dominion game, we kind of were, it was a question. It was, lost Jalen Walker. How's the linebacking core going to be, behind Aiden Fisher? There was a lot of guys who you're like projecting could be good, but, again, you're projecting. You hadn't seen him perform in these big moments. And Elijah Hardy, but Isaiah Jones specifically, he was unbelievable. He made his presence felt from the very first drive and was really in Luke Altmaier's face, just blowing up plays in the Illinois backfield all night.
Yeah, and it's really a testament to Indiana's development under Kurt Cignetti, because this is a guy, if we're talking about Isaiah Jones, who was here before Kurt Cignetti was here. He was here back in 2022 as his freshman season, but Kurt Cignetti kept him. He was one of the few holdovers from the Tom Allen era as far as the players are concerned. And it's a testament to the development and the player development at IU. And I think that's why the future looks the way it does for Indiana football, because it's obvious. You'll lose Aiden Fisher. You'll lose Mikal Kamara. You'll lose a lot of the JMU guys that have been so integral in kind of this 2 years, 1 year and a half, I guess, at this point under Kurt Cignetti. But the future is still bright for the Hoosiers because of guys like Isaiah Jones, because of guys like Elijah Hardy, because they are success stories for this staff as far as development is concerned. And you see it up and down the roster. Mario Landino and Tyreek Tucker, we just talked about them. There's guys on the offensive side as well. EJ Williams finally breaking out this year and being a little bit more productive. There's just so many success stories from a development perspective that it will help in the recruiting. It will help in transfer portal recruiting. It will help up and down, and it will show guys and make guys believe that they can go from being in 2022. Isaiah Jones didn't really see the field. He was playing on a team that it was Tom Allen's last year, and not second to last year, I guess, in 2022, and things weren't going well. He sticks it out. He holds over. He stays with Cignetti during the coaching change, and all of a sudden now he's winning Big Ten, or not winning Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week, but, making plays that a Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week type player would make with the amount of sacks, the tackles for loss he had against Illinois. Those are the type of success stories. That's just a testament to the development of this Indiana coaching staff.
Yeah, and another name, who doesn't really get – they don't really get the credit for it, and I think they should. It's Omar Cooper Jr. He's another guy that's, taking that next step and, is established himself as arguably the best wide receiver too in the Big Ten, one of the best in the country. He's a number one wide receiver on most teams in the country. And, we've been praising the defense. I don't think we really haven't even got to the offense. I think we should. They scored 63 points. And people are going to be like, oh, they ran the score up. You watch the game, Indiana's last 19 plays were runs. They weren't running the score up. They just dominated the trenches so much that they were just able to run it up, just running the ball at the end. But Omar Cooper Jr., another really good performance from him. Elijah Surratt, EJ Williams only had 3 catches, but really in a good touchdown catch in the back of the end zone on an incredible throw from Mendoza, who we're going to get to in a second. But the offense is clicking, and it feels like the offense is ahead of schedule. After week 1, we kind of were like, last year the offense might have been a little bit ahead. Through 4 weeks, I think the Indiana offense right now is better than it was last season. I think the entire team is better. I think if this team played last year's team, they would beat them pretty comfortably.
And I think if we do kind of transition into talking about Mendoza, I think that was where I was most curious about the offense, and that's where my biggest question marks personally were regarding the Indiana offense entering this season. Last year we saw it was obvious. Indiana's bread and butter offensively was the RPO game with Curtis Rourke, either pulling it out and firing it over the middle to a guy like Elijah Surratt. We saw a lot of those like little short slant kind of RPO type of plays. And Curtis Rourke was great with those. He was a fifth-year senior who's a guy who'd played a lot of college football. He was a very smart guy. He understood his reads in those situations very well. I was very curious to see how Fernando Mendoza kind of adjusted to the RPO game, because it's not something he did much at Cal, and it's not something he showed much on tape delivering in that RPO game. So I was really curious to see if Indiana went away from that a little bit, or if Fernando Mendoza acclimated and turned out to be really good in the RPO game as well. And it's been the latter. He has been fantastic in the RPO game, and it's the decision-making. He's still young, a redshirt junior. He's not the fifth-year guy that Curtis Rourke was. He's not a guy that I was expecting to necessarily be this far along in terms of how he processes the game at a split-second kind of level and decision-making process. He just makes those decisions so quickly, and we saw it so much against Illinois. We're going to see it so much throughout the rest of the season. The RPO games, the quick passes to Elijah Surratt on the outside, or even him coming over the middle, the ability to get the ball on time and on target to Riley Nowakowski on that tight end mid screen, the quick balls on time and on target to Omar Cooper that allow Cooper to do what he does best, which is gain yards after the catch. I think this offense, you can't start anywhere. Obviously, the offensive line's been great. The running game has been great. The receivers have been elite, and the tight ends have been fantastic. But this offense isn't what it is without the play of Fernando Mendoza, and there's a reason he is where he is at in terms of the Heisman discussion. I think we'll get to that a little bit later, Drew, but he's just been so fantastic. You can't really overstate, how good he has been and how important he has been. And I've been so impressed. The talent, we knew it was there, the arm talent, the ability to make any throw on the field, but it's the decision-making, the not turning it over yet this season, no interceptions, the ability to make those quick reads in the RPO game. That's what I've been most impressed with.
Yeah, you look at the last 3 weeks for Mendoza, 10 incompletions, 14 touchdown passes in his run for one in. Like, that's unheard of at any level of football. More touchdowns than incompletions. And I think with Mendoza, he might be the perfect, type of quarterback to play under Cignetti. Really live arm, good decision maker, but his release is so quick, and his decision making, it's like that. It's once he makes a decision, the ball is out of his hands so quickly. And there's a lot of, you look at the RPO game that Cignetti loves. And this, Mike Shanahan, Cignetti, we saw it last year with Rourke. Mendoza, there was a couple times, he kept it when maybe he should have gave it up and vice versa. But for the most part, just his decision-making in the RPO is so dangerous. And as soon as the linebackers bite, ball's pulled back and it's thrown to the slant to Omar Cooper Jr. or Surratt, who both over the middle. Talk about guys just have great hands and, willing to take hits over the middle. That's something, we see a lot of receivers. I'm not going to say some names, but we've seen in the NFL a couple of guys alligator arming recently, scared to get hit over the middle. Omar Cooper Jr. and Elijah Surratt are fearless over the middle, and it's given Mendoza that confidence to throw those tight window throws that he's really capable of because he knows those guys are going to come down with the football.
And, of course, we can't talk about the RPO game without talking about you have to be able to establish a run game to have the RPO game. If you don't have an established run game, if you can't move the ball on the ground, then the defense isn't going to sell for the fake on the RPO. They aren't going to sell out for the run option of the run-pass option. So you have to be able to run the ball, and I think that, too, is another thing that stood out to me is the balance. It's not just the fact that Fernando Mendoza is one of the top Heisman candidates and has played as well as he has. But this Indiana offense has rushed for 300-plus yards for the first 4 games of the season for the first time in program history, and it's not just been Roman Hemby, he's an all-Big Ten honorable mention. He's an all-Big Ten caliber back. He's carrying this run game. It's no matter who is carrying the ball. Kalen Black has been fantastic. Lee Beebe, before he went down with the injury, was great. And how about Kobe Martin stepping up, leading the team in rushing last week? He has 2 scores in back-to-back games. Again, I talked about it last week when the Lee Beebe news broke over at thehoosier.com. In our forums, I was discussing how Lee Beebe going down, it sucks for IU. Luckily for the Hoosiers, he'll have some more eligibility for years to come. But this Indiana program, they love what they have in Kobe Martin, and he's showing that so far in his not large role, but in the minutes and the snaps that he's played, he's shown exactly why he will be a featured back at some point in his IU career.
Yeah, I mean, he's led the team in rushing 2 weeks in a row. Indiana has 300 rushing yards in all 4 games this year. I have no idea what the record is for most games to start a season with 300 rushing yards. I'm sure it's, an Army, Navy type of team that, only runs the ball. But Indiana's, doing it against the non-conference schedule is one thing. Doing it against Illinois, a team that had shut down the run all season before last week, and we're going to see against Iowa. We're going to talk about that a bit. But this Indiana football team, they want to run the football. They just also happen to have one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And I think we should go to the, next segment. We kind of hinted at a little bit. Fernando Mendoza, Heisman favorite. How good is he? As you all probably know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code ON3, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. Before the season, I don't think any national media had him as the top 10 quarterback in the country, but where do you have him now? I'm going to list some of the, top quarterbacks in the Big Ten and country. I'm definitely going to miss some names. And if I miss a name that's like so obvious that I should say it, Zach, let me know and put it in. But I'm going to ask you, Zach, if you could switch right now, just this season only, are you taking Fernando Mendoza or these guys? The first name, we just saw him, Luke Altmaier.
And this is not projections for what I think they could do in the NFL. This is if I'm running a college football team and I want a guy for a singular year, who am I taking?
Yes, right now, if you have a game and you need to win in college football, this is the guy you want at your quarterback.
I mean, we just saw it. You have to take Fernando Mendoza over Luke Altmaier.
Yeah, it's going to get a little harder as we move on. I think Altmaier, I think if roles are reversed, they're in different situations. Altmaier probably could have played better. I think Altmaier still is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. But after last week, you have to give it to Mendoza. Next name is, first-year starter at Ohio State, Julian Sayin.
It has to be Mendoza still right now, just because of the fact that I do like what Sayin has done, and he did go in and beat Texas to open the year, but it's got to be Mendoza. Sayin he's too young right now, not consistent enough. I haven't seen enough from him yet.
Yeah, I agree with you there. All right, next name on the list, I'm going to go to the Oregon quarterback, a guy I am extremely high on, Dante Moore.
We both are extremely high on Dante Moore, and if there is a quarterback hierarchy in the Big Ten, it might be 1A, 1B with Mendoza and Moore right now, because Dante Moore, I think he's thrown 11 touchdowns and 1 interception so far this year, and that Oregon offense might be the best offense in the country by a wide margin. They are putting up 60 points on anybody and everybody they play. So it'll be interesting to see how they play against Penn State this weekend. And that could determine, just how high up Dante Moore is in the quarterback hierarchy in the country. But I'm still going to go with Mendoza just because the efficiency has been there so far. I do love Dante Moore, but Mendoza, it's hard to argue with what he's done so far.
Yeah, this one's a toss-up for me. I go Mendoza right now just because we've seen it against Illinois. After, next week when we see how he does at Penn State, that could change. If Dante Moore comes out and is, has a great game, Oregon goes into Happy Valley at whiteout and wins, that could definitely flip. And they're going to talk about the quarterback on the other side, Drew Aller.
Aller has not impressed me, unfortunately, to begin this year. He's one of those guys that I was high on entering the year, but he hasn't impressed me. And the same goes with him, with Dante Moore as well. Even Fernando Mendoza this week against Iowa. It'll be interesting to see how these quarterbacks handle these big-time games now that we're into conference play. But I'm going to take Mendoza here. Aller, he's really good. He's just the highs aren't as high. The lows maybe aren't as low as some other guys. But you know what you're going to get from him, but there's not a ton more that he's able to offer.
Yeah, if you're building a quarterback in a lab, Drew Aller is, has a lot of those traits that you want from your quarterback. And we've seen him do it. But in those big matchups, that's the thing where I lean Mendoza. And again, this Oregon-Penn State game could change that. If one of those guys balls out against a really good team, maybe, we start to flip it a little bit. It's only week 5 now. But, yeah, I lean Mendoza there. Now let's get to some national names. I'm going to start with Haynes King at Georgia Tech, a guy who, college football fans they know this guy because he is, so quietly, become one of the best quarterbacks in the country.
I'm going to go Mendoza here just because of the fact that Haynes King, you have to almost build an offense around just because he's much more of a kind of run-first guy than he is a passing quarterback. Let's pull it up right now. He's got 2 passing touchdowns on the year, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 interception. He's thrown the ball 66 times and run the ball 52 times. So you almost kind of have to build an offense around him. So if I'm plugging in a quarterback that I want in my offense, I have to go Mendoza, I think, just because he's a little bit more versatile, a little bit more well-rounded. I don't know if I completely trust Haynes King to lead an offense down the field, passing the ball in a late game situation in a tough road environment late in the season.
Yeah, for those reasons you said, I do lean Mendoza, but Haynes King is a baller and one of those guys that you love to have on your team. All right, the next name on the list, Florida State's quarterback, Thomas Castellanos.
He's one of those guys you see high up in the Heisman conversations in this season, and I think for good reasons. I think he's been great. But for me, all I needed to see was that loss in overtime against Michigan State. Now, not that Boston College necessarily has a ton of talent around Castellanos, but still, in those situations, if I want a guy, I want a guy to step up. Now, again, not that Castellanos really lost the game for Boston College or anything like that in that game against Michigan State, but I'd still take Mendoza over Castellanos just because he didn't get it done against the Spartans.
Yeah, not the throw, like 38 attempts in 3 games. It's kind of, but again, another guy, I'd put him in that Haynes King, like a baller who, when you need a big moment, he's someone that can deliver. But, last year at Boston College, we saw, some of the lows were really low. All right, I'm going to give a name that's, more of a what if at this point, because, a lot of hype about him coming to the season and really hasn't lived up to it. Kind of getting the swagger back a little bit we saw last week, but Arch Manning.
This is a tough one, and this was where what my answer would differ if I was talking about the NFL draft or just one season. But up to this point in the season, you have to go Mendoza. I mean, he's just objectively been a better quarterback than Arch so far this season.
Yeah, I agree completely. 2 years from now, I think Arch will probably be the better player at that point, maybe. You don't really know. It's hard to make these projections, but at this current moment, it's, for me at least, it's easily Mendoza. All right, 3 left. Carson Beck at Miami having, a really nice resurgence over there. And Miami is, one of the probably best team in the country, based on resume at this point in time.
Carson Beck is tough. I still think I'm going to take Mendoza here. Not anything really against Carson Beck. He's been really solid, but he is a little bit too mistake prone in my eyes, a little bit too turnover prone. In my eyes, I think he's got 3 interceptions already this year, and I think 2 of them came against South Florida, who is good, but not the best team that they have played so far on their schedule. But I'm still going to take Mendoza. Back a little too mistake-prone for me.
All right, going to get to the final 2, and these will probably be the hardest ones, I think. A guy who, before an injury was the Heisman favorite, now it's Mendoza, John Mateer.
Again, this is a tough one because Mateer has passed every test, and he was awesome last year at Washington State. He was awesome really every time he played at Washington State. Again, I think he's got 3 interceptions this season. Now the schedule probably been a little bit tougher for Oklahoma. He played against Michigan, so we'll see how Michigan shakes up this season, if they're the real deal or not. I'm gonna take Mendoza just because I just watched him in person put up 63 points on a top 10 team in the country. But Mateer is probably like a 1B, 1C right now to Mendoza.
Yeah, this is where I differ. I'm going to lean Mateer here. Again, it's a toss-up for me. It's one of those things. You could go either way. I think Indiana has a lot more of a quarterback-friendly offense than Oklahoma, and I think that's helped him. It's not the Lincoln Riley Oklahoma. It's the Brent Venables. This is an SEC Oklahoma team, and I think Mateer's been awesome. And he was the Heisman favorite before the injury announcement. Hopefully, for his sake and Oklahoma, and college football's sake, he gets back sooner than later because, Oklahoma needs them. This stretch is brutal, and not having him is going to hurt. All right, the last name, a lot of people have this guy as the number 1 pick. It's kind of back and forth between him and Mendoza. LSU's Garrett Nussmeier.
I think this will be the time I go against Fernando Mendoza. We've seen Gus Nussmeier do it for too long at this point. We saw what he did last year out at LSU. Obviously, he didn't really play full seasons in the years prior, but he's just got the experience advantage over Mendoza. He's been doing it in the SEC for his entire career at LSU. The interceptions were a problem last year, yes, but I'm going to take Nussmeier. He's got the experience advantage, and I'm taking the Nuss bus.
Yeah, I'm going to agree there. I do think Mendoza's played better up until this point through the first 4 games, but I've seen it with Nussmeier for a longer period of time. And it's one of those things, it's close. You mentioned the 1A, 1B, 1C. I think, the top 3 quarterbacks in college football at this moment in time, week 4 of 2025, it's Mendoza, Mateer, and Nussmeier. You can put them in any order you want, and I won't, be critical of it. It's just, a statement to how good Mendoza's been. You said you have a name, though, you want to throw in too.
Yes, I have maybe a 1D to throw into this category. I'm very high on this guy. Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. I know he's dealt with some injury stuff this year, but what are your thoughts on Lenora Sellers? Where would you rank him in this kind of upper echelon tier of quarterbacks?
I really like Lenore Sellers. I do. It's hard for me right now. He got hurt against Vandy, was back against Mizzou, played pretty well in that one, even though they lost. I would go Mendoza there just because I've seen him. Sellers last year down the stretch was probably the best quarterback in the country, but this year it hasn't been to that level. He's up there for one of the best in the country. It's just for me a step below those other three guys.
My thing about Sellers is if you put him in this Indiana offense right now with the weapons they have and the system they run and his athleticism, I think – holy crap, that'd be kind of crazy to see with his athleticism and his raw talent and his raw ability. I think that'd be pretty special. But I do agree Mendoza right now at this point.
That's a good point, though. Putting him in, his, the talent he has, it's, we're not projecting NFL. If we're projecting NFL with more Sellers, it might be a different story for, if I'm taking Mendoza or him. Because, the talent, the arm, the athletic, it's, Mendoza, it's not an issue there. He's a great athlete, great arm, super accurate. But Sellers, it's one of those,
once in a generation, once in a lifetime type of athletes as far as his combination of athletic ability, speed, agility outside the pocket, plus the ability to throw the football.
Yeah. Before we wrap talking Indiana football, we got to get to this Iowa game. It's, Iowa's 3-1 coming off a win at Rutgers. This feels like a textbook trap game. Really, you have a bye week in Oregon on the other side, coming off, the biggest win of the Cignetti era, you could argue. I would probably say that it is, obviously a year and a half. But, this Iowa football team, they're not a national Big Ten contender, but they're also a lot better than, some people may think. Going to Kinnick Stadium, that's tough. Indiana hasn't won there since 2007.
Yeah, and you bring up trap game, and it takes me back to last season for a second, Drew, because to me, I don't think Curt Cignetti allows for his team to play trap games just because of the mindset he instills in his team. If we remember back to last year, it was week 3. Indiana goes on the road to Pasadena, beats UCLA, massive win at the time for IU, really kind of set the stage for what was to come the rest of the year for the Hoosiers. You come back home the following week and you have Charlotte, and a lot of people were saying, Charlotte's a trap game, and obviously Charlotte not the opponent that Iowa is, but Indiana won that game 52-14. They dominated. They took care of business in what many were referring to as a trap game at the time. So I just don't believe, and again, until I'm proven wrong, I can't bet against, so to speak, Curt Cignetti and his Indiana Hoosiers. I mean, yes, it's on the road. Yes, Indiana had their fair share of struggles on the road in big games against really, really good teams, and it'll be another case of that this year or this week against Iowa. But until I'm proved wrong that this offense this year can't travel and can't get it done against even one of the better defenses, and this defensive front can't get to the quarterback even despite the offensive line that Iowa has, you have to ride with Indiana just given what they've shown so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, Cignetti, the mindset of him versus, other coaches. He said he thought the Iowa game would be tougher. The trap game, you mentioned the Charlotte game. I just want to throw one, quick tidbit in there. That head coach of that Charlotte team, Biff Poggi, led Michigan to 2-0 during his, fill-in for Sharon Moore during the suspension. IU fans probably remember the tank tops and cutoffs from him, some interesting style choices. So fun college football guy. But Cignetti's really put a point of, not looking past opponents, not looking ahead, one game at a time, 1 week at a time. And I think that's, obviously the right mentality to have. But it's going to be so easy for these guys to, go on social media, Fernando Mendoza, see, he's the Heisman favorite now. He has all this hype, the truth is they're college. Like these guys, they're 18 to 23, 24, depending how long some of them have been.
Or if you're Solomon Van Horst, you're 25.
Yeah, exactly. So, it can be very easy to look ahead and be like, hey, we got the bye week, we win this Iowa game. That bye week's going to be awesome. 5-0 on campus, Bloomington's probably rocking at this point. But, this Iowa team's really good. It's not really good, but they're good. Signetti has said it. This is going to be a tough game. They play defense. Mark Gronowski, that's a guy I don't want to say I was really wrong about, but I was pretty off on him. I thought he was going to be a lot better than he's been so far. He's been, more productive as a runner than a passer thus far. Iowa's going to be without Jay-Z and Patterson, their leading rusher. So, that's a big loss for them. Indiana has done a really good job against the run for the most part. We saw it last week, 2 rushing yards for Illinois. With Iowa without their leading rusher, and that's a team that wants to run the football, you got to wonder how that's going to work for them.
Yeah, I don't know if Patterson's going to be too big of a loss. The Iowa On 3 people have let me know countless times that Patterson, while yes, he's the leading rusher, was not kind of the RB1 coming into the year. That was Moulton, who is back for this game and will likely reassume those RB1 duties. But it is a hit, obviously, to lose your leading rusher, but not as big of a hit as I think some people could potentially make it out to be. But it'll be interesting to see. My biggest thing I'm circling with this game is Iowa's offensive line. The PFF grades love them. The advanced numbers love them. They are the number one, the best offensive line in the entire country, according to Pro Football Focus. So I'm interested to see how Indiana handles that, because obviously there's ways around that. You can just bring more guys, and Iowa's offensive line can block, and that's one way to kind of try and get around that. But it also throws another wrench in, and we talked about this last week when we were previewing Illinois. Luke Altmaier wasn't super mobile. He was, once he kind of collapsed the pocket, he was going to go down. He wasn't going to escape from the guys that Indiana has rushing the quarterback. Mark Gronowski is different. He can better escape from the pocket. He's much more along the lines of a Colton Joseph or an Amari Odom like Indiana saw in the first 2 weeks of the season. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm not expecting 7 sacks, probably not expecting 10 tackles for a loss either in this game. I will be curious if Indiana can get to that 3 or 4 sack mark against Gronowski and against an offensive line that's as good as Iowa's. That will spell success for IU.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the football, Iowa's a team that they've done a really good job against the run, 60 yards per game allowed, 2.3 per attempt. So, Indiana's been able to run the football, averaging over 300 yards in every single game so far. What's going to break? Are they going to be able to run through that Iowa defense like we saw against Illinois, or is that Iowa defense going to be able to stand up against Indiana's run game? But Zach, it's prediction time. Last week, we did predict Indiana to win, but our predictions could not. The only way they could have been worse is predicting Illinois win this game. The Hoosiers are 7.5-point favorites. Over/under is 48.5, presented by BetMGM. Zach, what's your prediction for this game?
I will give us some credit. We both predicted. I think. Did you have a 2-score game last week?
No, I did not.
Okay, I had a 2-score game. I know Colin had a 2-score game last week and his prediction, but I do think Indiana wins this game. I know that Kinnick is a tough place to play. It's going to be loud. It'll be outside of South Bend and Ohio Stadium last year, the loudest place and probably the loudest place Fernando Mendoza has ever played a college football game. So we'll see on that front. I'm going to go IU win. I just think this team is so talented, and they understand the shortcomings they had last year in those loud road environments at Ohio State and at Notre Dame. I think Indiana is able to get it done. Now, the score prediction, that's a completely different thing. It's not as difficult to predict who's winning versus who's losing, but the score prediction, I don't know, because Iowa just gave up 21 points, all of which in the first half, to Rutgers. They allowed 300-plus passing yards to Rutgers, and I think this Indiana passing attack is better than the Rutgers passing attack. So I could see Fernando Mendoza getting it going. I think I'll go, and this might surprise some people just because it's an Iowa defense, but I think I'll go Indiana 35 and Iowa 17 in this one. I think Indiana, if I would have said that before the season started, I probably would have called myself crazy just because it's an Iowa defense in Kinnick. But I think 35-17 is seeming about right for me going into this week.
Yeah, I'm in kind of a similar spot. I think, Iowa, they want to run the football. I think their recipe for success is controlling the time of possession, keeping the Indiana offense off the field, grinding out the game. And I don't think we're going to see Indiana score 60 points again. I go 31-10. I just don't believe in this Iowa offense enough to keep them really in this game. But I do think they're going to be able to, control enough clock to where Indiana's not going to have the possessions to score 40 points in this game.
And I want to add something real quick, Drew. We'll add a secondary prediction here. Over-under will set up 0.5. How many special teams touchdowns are scored in this weekend's game? Because both of these two teams are great on special teams.
Oh my, that's the. I kind of want to say over. I'm going to go over, but it's also. Can we throw defensive touchdowns into there too?
Defense/special teams.
If we're doing the fantasy football defense/special teams, then I'm taking the over for sure. If it's just special teams, then I'm probably going to lean under.
My thing with that is I don't think IU is going to kick it to Caden Wheatgen, especially not in kickoff. Brandon Frankie's been great at booting those out of the end zone, but I don't think whether it's Quinn Warren or Mitch McCarthy, Wheatgen is going to have many opportunities to return, and Indiana might not punt much. And on the flip side, I think Iowa's way too talented in the punt coverage, kickoff coverage for Jonathan Brady to have too many open gaps, or Roman Hemby or whoever's returning kickoffs. Indiana doesn't really pull many kickoffs out, but I would not be surprised. I'm going to take the under on the 0.5 special teams only, but I would not be surprised if we saw some special teams magic in this weekend's game.
Yeah, why not another D'Angelo Pons, block, punt, scoop, and score? We didn't even talk about that. Blocking the punt, recovering it yourself, breaking the that is one of the most incredible special teams plays you'll ever see. Talk about doing it all yourself.
That's 2 games now this year. 2 out of the 4 games IU has played where they have their first points have come from special teams because Jonathan Brady got punt return earlier in the year.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Zach. We are going to have all the coverage from this weekend's game. Zach, are you going to be in Iowa for this one?
I will be in Iowa City. I will not necessarily be providing super live up-to-date coverage. I'm on the IU student radio broadcast call for this weekend.
So, yeah, make sure you're tuning into that and following Zach. We're going to have you fully covered, but we're going to be right back after a quick message from our sponsors. And Kyler Staley, the Hoosiers basketball recruiting analyst, is going to join the show, and we're going to talk Chase Branham's commitment to IU basketball and some other basketball recruiting news.
Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find everything you need, from grills to jerseys and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike and Under Armour, all at unbeatable prices every day. With 8 Academy stores across Indiana, including our Bloomington location, fun can't lose, and neither can you. Gear up today at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
We'll be right back, but first, we have to talk to you guys about Rhoback Activewear. There's only one way to describe Rhoback: best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rhoback, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite. With novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs from some of your favorite schools, including the Indiana Hoosiers, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Rhoback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code IND20 on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers throughout the end of the week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code IND20. Now back to the rest of this episode of the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast. Welcome in, Kyler. A lot to talk about is, no breaking news podcast from us, but Chase Branham, 2027 guard, committed to Indiana. Kyler, first, how are you? I feel like I haven't seen you in a bit.
Yeah, it's been a little bit, been a few weeks and stuff, but you and Zach have been holding the fort down when it comes to all the football stuff. But yeah, you said no breaking news podcast, but obviously, why I'm here to talk about is IU got Chase Branham. So 2027 guard. We couldn't really do a breaking news podcast because it happened right, probably 30 minutes before kickoff for the IU Illinois game. So shout out to you for getting up that article real quick. I'll give you that. So
thanks.
Indiana had a couple of big time visitors last weekend for the IU football game. Official visits. We had Ethan Taylor, 2026 4-star center, the number 2 center in the class. He was on campus, and then Chase Branham, 2027 4-star guard who was on for an official visit, and he committed while he was on his official visit to Indiana. So he was a guy, one of the first guys, he might have even been the first guy that I can remember off the top of my head that Darren DeVries and his staff offered when Darren took the IU job. So when was that? Way back in May?
Yeah.
May or so. But yeah, so he's a guy that Indiana's obviously been recruiting pretty hard. I know assistant coach Nick Norton's been a big factor in this recruitment. He's kind of led it to that sense. So it's a guy that just, you know, when you look at him, you watch him playing stuff, super long at 6'4", 6'5", just that typical guard, that versatile guard that DeVries wants in his system. Guys that can play both on and off the ball, where I do feel like Chase Branham, even though he's probably listed as a point guard right now, I think long-term his college potential is more of a shooting guard type of thing, a guy that can play primarily on the wing, but he's got handles, he's got facilitating skills that where he can play an on-ball guard if it calls for it. So, but he's just a knockdown shooter, sneaky athletic guy, super long knockdown shooter, like I said, off the ball, cuts really well, uses ball screens a lot, both on and off the ball to create for himself. So I think Indiana got a really, really good pick, top 40 player in the 2027 class. There's even talk that he could possibly, one, jump up to maybe a 5-star level if he continues to progress. And then two, there's a chance he might even reclassify and join the 2026 class. But obviously, that's just kind of a wait and see right now with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different kind of feel for Indiana. You know, we kind of talked before we, you know, started recording. India, like landing a guy like Chase Branham so far in advance. You know, most, you know, these 2027 guys, a lot of them, like this is if he stays in the 2027 class, but they're not going to commit for probably another year, a lot of them. So, you know, landing a recruit like Chase Branham, it shows DeVries' commitment to, you know, he's said it so often. He wants to build from the ground up. He wants to, you know, start from the high school, build his culture that way. You know, this year, obviously, completely brand new roster, so many transfers. So that's not how Darren DeVries wants to build his program. And, you know, Chase Branham's early commitment is evidence of that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it just kind of fits what he's talked about. Like you mentioned, he's a guy that, and I'll give the old staff, the Mike Woodson staff, credit too. They did a good job of extending offers, you know, down the line, 2-3 years down the line, and then for the most part, you know, sticking with those relationships and continue to build relationships for years to come. But it makes perfect sense why DeVries, and I think you're going to see a lot like this. You know, he's going to go after guys, you know, long term down the road. This guy's going to help us, you know, eventually 2 years from now. And that's exactly what Chase Branham is. You know, for them to get a guy that's 2 years down the road as it stands right now, I think that's huge, because then the guys that Indiana's recruiting, they already have a guy that's already committed, and they can say, hey, you come here, we're going to help. You can play right next with Chase Branham. This is how he helps your game. This is how you're going to help his game. And this is how you're going to help us in general. So he's a really, really talented player. I really do like what he can bring. If he does, you know, level up to that 2026 class, I don't know if level up's the right word, but if he does reclassify to that 2026 class, he'll come in. He'll still be more of a developmental piece. Kind of similar to how like Race Thompson was back in the day when he committed, reclassified and came up, was kind of a developmental piece, and that's kind of what I see him being. But yeah, I mean, it's really, really good. I'm curious to see if they can maybe, you know, get another guy in the 2027 class that they're recruiting, if they can get another guy added early. But that's just kind of a wait and see approach right there.
Yeah, level up. You know, sounds like you're talking about NBA 2K right now.
Yeah, leveling up your my player, things like that. So.
Hey, you know, the 2K colleges are coming, you know, that way. So, you know, not that far off. But one thing I do want to talk about this commitment, the video, you know, Brandon posted of, you know, him telling DeVries and like that reaction, that's, you know, that's something this program's missed. Like that kind of passion, like how pumped up Darren DeVries was when, you know, Chase Branham said, I'm coming. That like that, those are the videos that's like, all right, you know, yes, Indiana still has to take the 4. We still want to see this team play under DeVries. But those are the things it's like, yeah, we might have a guy at head coach who, you know, everyone said D-Rock, he's a grinder. Darren DeVries, you know, he's working. We've seen him all summer. But like the personality of like really caring and just like how these players, you know, Chase Branham, you know, he's not even just committed to him, how quickly, you know, he embraces these guys. It's really good to see from this program.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you that Darren DeVries, you know, he is a ball coach, but he's also a very personable guy. And he's a guy that And I love that video, like you mentioned, because, DeVries had a little bit of shock. He was just like, wait, what did I just hear? And then Branham had to, re-say, hey, I'm coming to Indiana. And then that whole celebration was really cool. And it even extends you to know, like, the guys that he's been recruiting, obviously they say some great things about him. I mean, Prince Alexander Moody, I mean, they recruited him for like 2 months and he committed to Indiana. And he obviously, he's been a great ambassador for the program. He's constantly on Twitter saying, Hoosier Nation, stand up and things like that, rooting for the football team and stuff. So it's just cool to have those guys, those guys that can promote. And, in the years to come, you recruit guys that, think are going to fit your style of play, but also at the same time, they're great culture pieces. And right now, what Darren DeVries has got, and I'll even go with the current guys that he has now on this team, they all make sense. They're the type of players that he wants on the floor and stuff. But they're also really, really good guys. And you're not going to hear anything bad about these guys. They don't come with any baggage. And, a lot of these guys, Lamar Wilkerson, Tayton Conaway, those guys started from, the JUCO level and grinded their way up and stuff. And you're going to get guys that are going to want to work hard. And they're just going to be really, really good people at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's getting, not necessarily, the top, those 5-star top of the, top recruits. It's getting the right guys. And I think that's something that we've, Indiana's kind of gone away from, the past decade, even going past Mike Woodson. We've seen these, top 5-star recruits. I'm not saying I'm going to give any names, but, there was so much talent on the roster and it didn't come together for whatever reason. So, building a program like this where you're, building, for people and, who these guys are as players, but also off the court too. That's something, you really want to see from Darren DeVries and, taking this program in a completely different direction to where it's been the last 5-10 years.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to Chase Branham, he does look like a guy that is going to be really good for the program. Yeah. Comes from a great family, a good guy, high IQ guy, really, really smart. He just fits, what Indiana needs. And like I mentioned, was one of the first guys that DeVries and his staff really went after, when DeVries got the job. And stuck with it. And, it wasn't a super long recruitment and stuff. They just stuck with it. And then they showed, kind of the proof, like, hey, this is where you fit in and things like that. And they were rewarded with a really, really talented guy, a lot of potential. I think, when he does get to the college level, it may take him a year or two, but I do think he's going to be one of the better Big Ten players, when it comes to shooting and spacing the floor, and just overall playmaking as well. So, they're starting off really, really hot. Yeah. Darren DeVries is doing a really, really good job with this recruiting class. He's getting guys. And I don't think that Indiana's done, with the 2026 class or the 2027 class by far.
Yeah, I not at all. I mean, I keep saying Chase Branham, talking about him as a person, but he is such a good player too. It's not like he's, one of those guys. It's like, oh, he's a culture. No, he's a really good player too. So it's, best of both worlds in that sense. And then you said it. Darren DeVries is not done with this class. I think, everywhere you've kind of, reading between the lines, it seems like 4 is the target. They want 4 guys in this high school class. So if Chase Branham does, come up to 2026, which has been, rumored, nothing official yet, but that would be 2 more with him and Prince Alexander Moody. There's a couple other guys whose recruitments we are following pretty closely, including, a guy like Ethan Taylor who just visited pretty recently. So Kyler, who are some other guys Indiana fans should be watching for in the coming weeks with their recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's probably a top tier, I would say, of guys that Indiana's recruiting hard, and you kind of at first there was a lot of offers being sent out, a lot of offers, and it was kind of hard to keep track of. But I think things have kind of settled down a little bit, especially for the 26 class. But you mentioned Ethan Taylor. Obviously, he's probably the big guy. No pun intended, but he's the big person to keep an eye on right now. I think he has a Kansas visit this weekend. Michigan State's another school that's been pretty involved with him. So I think Indiana's in a really good spot with him. Obviously, the bread and butter for DeVries and his staff are going to be getting perimeter guys and, guards and playmaking guards and stuff. But in order to compete in the Big Ten, you need guys like Ethan Taylor. You need to have guys that can really compete in the front court. So if they get him, he's going to help them tremendously right away when he gets to the floor. Another name, Anthony Thompson, the highest rated target that Indiana's recruiting right now, a guy that, they've been recruiting, the previous staff recruited him pretty hard. And then right away, DeVries hopped on and recruiting him as well. 5-star wing. Looks like it's probably going to come down to Indiana and Ohio State, according to Joe Tipton at On3 and Rivals. I think that's probably where you're going to see. He's an Ohio kid, so Ohio State's making a big push for him. If Indiana can land Anthony Thompson, he plays for the Indiana Elite program, Coach Adams, and, his connection there, that would be pretty big if they could get him. A couple other guys, Junior County, guard, Indiana's not in that Tate Kinney running anymore. They just lost out on, is it Anthony Brown?
Yes.
Anthony Brown. They just lost out on him. So, to me, it looks like they're going full tilt at Junior County, but UConn's obviously a big factor with that. To me, and a lot of people have said it too, it looks like it's UConn's to lose. So you have to kind of keep an eye on that. If Indiana doesn't land Junior County, I think that's when the rumor mill might, ramp up a little bit more with Chase Branham, maybe reclassifying and filling that spot. But it's just kind of a wait and see. And then the last person, Latrell Altman, a guy that's already been on Indiana's campus, I think back in June, when he took his official visit. It looks like it's down to Indiana and Tennessee. I think he's got a few more visits as well. I can't think of the schools off the top of my head, but that's just kind of the groups to kind of watch. I do think that Indiana is at least going to land one more guy out of that group. But it would not shock me to see if Indiana landed, two more guys. It's just kind of a wait and see situation.
Yeah, there's five without not including Brandon. There's 5 spots next year. There's probably going to be a transfer or 2 thrown in there. I expect 3 more high school players. Behind Prince Alexander Mooney. Whether one of them's Brandon, that's kind of something to watch for. Whether he stays in 2027 or moves up. You mentioned Junior Counties as someone to watch, kind of affecting that decision. But find that balance for Darren DeVries. Of transfers and freshmen and. It's difficult in college basketball today. You see some programs, like at Duke last year where they were completely built for the most part on freshmen. But then you see a Florida team that was built a lot of transfers. So finding that balance, that in between, that's the challenge of today. But I think Darren DeVries is the guy who, he's built to be able to figure out that challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one last thing I just want to mention, there's been a lot of talk with Chase Branham committing with the 27 class. What does that do with the recruiting of Jason Gardner Jr., Fisher's guard, local kid? I don't think anybody needs to panic right now. I do think that Indiana's still going to keep recruiting Jason Gardner Jr. He's got some unofficial visits set up, but he does want to set up some more visits, with Indiana being one of them. And I fully expect it to be eventually an official visit with him. Just because they recruited a guard that's, versatile like Chase Branham and stuff doesn't mean that they won't go after more guards. And Jason Gardner Jr. being in their backyard, they're definitely going to go after him. And they're going to continue to build a really strong relationship. Coach Adams has done a really good job with that recruitment so far. But there's obviously a lot more schools that are getting involved. Kentucky's getting involved with him as well. So there'll be more blue bloods out there that go after Jason Gardner Jr. But just want to keep give a little update on that end.
Yeah, and all things Indiana recruiting, we're gonna have you covered on the Hoosier. Also, Indiana basketball, Indiana football, and pretty much all Indiana sports, all over the Hoosier. Make sure you guys have subscribed if you haven't done so already. The athletic subscription, which you guys saw the ad for in the beginning, that's a really good bonus there. Also, follow the Hoosier on 3 on X/Twitter. And guys, if you are a member of the Hoosier, be active on the message board, man. We appreciate it. We want to talk to you guys. We want your opinions on stuff. When this news breaks, when guys are, visiting, we want to hear your thoughts on these players after the game. We want to hear all that stuff from you. Also, guys, subscribe to the Hoosier on 3 on YouTube. Make sure you're following Talking About the Hoosiers on Spotify and hit that like button, guys. It takes 2 seconds, but it makes such a difference
right
for
now.
us.
Do it right now as you're listening. There's a subscribe button underneath this video. Hit it. It doesn't cost anything, and it helps us as much as what we can say. It is so helpful. Just hit that subscribe button. It'll be the best thing you've ever done.
Yeah, you guys are going to forget 30 seconds from now that you even hit that like button, but we're not. We're going to remember, and it's going to matter to us. Also, comment on the videos, guys. If you have an opinion, you have a take, or you want to hear us talk about something, if there's a debate you've been having with your buddies and you want to hear us talk about it, bring it up. We are all ears. Guys, thank you for tuning in to the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast. We'll be back.